Welcome to Deep Future Analytics. I'm Joe Breeden, CEO of DFA, and I appreciate you spending a few minutes with us to walk through our software application, Prescient Manager. This application is really a product suite. We offer several modules performing different functions. I'll take you through a few of the basic modules today. The users of the software provide loan level account performance data, anonymized, to our secure FTP server. That data is analyzed, loan level models created. These are high quality industry leading models, multi-horizon survival models, for which we have written academic publications. We've disclosed how they work, but they are an advanced approach that gives you both near-term and long-term accuracy in aggregate and down to the individual account level. So that capability allows us to solve lots of different problems with the same core set of models. The application here is showing both historic data and the forecasts from those models. What you can see is this is a demo that we have, of course. There's a range of different products being shown here. The home screen is configurable, but what we have right now is a 12-month loss forecast. I can zoom in to any image that you see, look at the different components. This is showing me the projected 12-month losses in different categories for different vintage tiers. And any graph that you see, you can flip over and see the numbers behind it, like a baseball card. And if I look across here, you get an idea. This is also a quick view of what you can expect by vintage. So you'll see most of the losses are going to come in the recent vintages, and of course in the major product categories. Anything you see you can download. If it's a table, you can export to CSV. If it's a graph, you can export to PDF or PNG. We also have reports on every tab where if you click on download report, it automatically generates a PDF document with explanation of the feature that you're looking at. If it was a model tab, it would explain how the models work. If it's CECIL, it explains how we calculate CECIL. And then it collects all the different outputs. You don't have to go through and click on every possible graph. We're trying to do that for you. Now, what you see here is very configurable. On most tabs, there's a button that says change dimensions. And that means I can bring up a dimension selector that uses any of the variables that are in our input data and choose to add or remove segmentation along those. So for auto, I could say that I want to see it by term and origination score or state. For consumer loans, I might want to look at this by delinquency bucket, whatever you choose. The analysis always shows the status. This is actually a group environment where you can collaborate with others on your team, share scenarios, and so it's always going to show you the most recent data uploaded and the most recent forecast run. Now, everything in here is scenario driven. And in fact, on that home screen, I was just showing you one scenario, but you could have chosen others that were already loaded. The economic scenarios are where we start. You can either download an Excel template and fill in your own economic scenarios if you have a preferred economic scenario provider. If you don't, you can come to the predefined scenarios. We keep the FRB, the Federal Reserve Board DFAST scenarios loaded. We also provide free scenarios from our Scenario AI service. And right now you can see we're doing updates every 2 weeks, looking at how the current crisis could evolve. The most recent scenario set has been V, U, and W scenarios, but this can change. And as the situation, the economic situation changes, we'll keep adapting these scenarios. You can also use last point for the environment, moving averages, those sorts of things. Once you've chosen a scenario, then you need to pick an origination scenario. Now, you could say no new originations, treat it like a runoff portfolio, or you can do a predefined origination scenario, 6-month moving average, 10% year-over-year growth or contraction. You can also download a template. In fact, you can generate your own template with that same dimensionality selector so that you can put in your originations plan monthly by the segments the way you look at it. So you can be as detailed or high level as you like. The combination of an economic scenario and an origination scenario is something you give a name to and add it to the list. You can run as many as you like. The more you run, the slower things get because you have to compute lots of things, but there are no hard limits. Now, one of these scenarios will have a star next to it. That's the reference scenario. At the end of each month, we archive that so that you can look back and make comparisons. And this is particularly valuable when it comes to doing CECIL comparisons. I mentioned that this is actually a product suite. So even though CECIL uses a life of loan calculation, we basically simulate for every individual account what the full life of the loan could be. But for forecasting and stress testing, you would pick a specific horizon over which you're going to choose new originations and design economic scenarios, that sort of thing. And so here you can make this as far in the future as you like. Of course, the further you choose, the slower it'll go. That's a choice. Now we have a data tab, which is great for performing audits. You can come and look at your historic data and check to see that all the accounts are getting loaded, that the historic totals by segment look the way you expect, and you can look across a range of different metrics, and you can look by different vintages. Now, this is the performance data. We also look at the scoring metrics. You can come in and any of the fields that we use for scoring, you can look at what your portfolio percentages might be by that. And again, it's a way of reviewing the data that is going into the scores. We've seen cases where people were concerned about a volatility in their forecast, came back and found that they had outages in the data, that suddenly origination score was missing or LTV was missing. So you can come back and review the data that way. The economic tab is where we show the economic factors that we're using. These are the ones that we're getting scenarios from Scenario AI for use in the software. Also, we automatically go out and refresh the history by state every month from the Federal Reserve Economic Data Repository, FRED. So you don't have to. So you can come here, look at the history, scenarios in the states you're in or any other state you want. You can also do transformations on these if you'd like to see what the percentage change in house prices is over a certain period of time. If I looked at percentage change, it would ask me what window of time would I like, and I can do those sorts of things. This way you can replicate the transformations that we use in the software and see what's driving the forecast. Now, the analysis tab is completely optional. There's nothing you have to do here in order to run forecasts. But if you're talking to an examiner or an auditor and they want to know what's driving the models, we show every coefficient in the system. So what you'll be able to see here are the life cycles, the net environmental impacts, the economic models that we're using, looking at both the individual account factors as well as the fit to the economic fit. And again, all of this is by state when we're talking about economics. Then for scoring, you can actually look through all the scoring factors, everything that goes into each of these scores and all of the statistics. You don't need to, but you can. So here, instead of looking at this graphically, I can look at it visually. We have different coefficients for different forecast horizons. This is how we get that accuracy, both near term and long term that I was talking about. So there's a lot more we could talk about there, but that's another presentation for another time. The forecast tab is where you can do basic forecasting and stress testing. And what you'll see here, these primary product categories, again, I can segment everything. If I Scroll down, I can choose different metrics. Now, right away, you can see in active accounts the difference between new originations growth and runoff portfolio with no new originations. If I come down and look at something like charge-off accounts, I could look at this by calendar date or age of the accounts, but I've got many different economic scenarios I can look at. I can also split this out by individual vintages. Let me start by just looking at charge-off accounts overall. And what you'll see are the impacts of these different economic scenarios we're talking about. The green line here is the Federal Reserve severe scenario, which is a scenario full of shocks. It's rather extreme and you get some extreme results. The other scenarios are more smooth and continuous. For most of our clients, what you're seeing is what we would expect, that peak losses due to the COVID-19 recession are going to be coming next year. Now, if I really wanted to zoom in a little bit, let's say I was focused most on the COVID-19 severe scenario, which is essentially our W scenario right now. But instead of looking at all vintages, let's pick a few. We can see what the forecasts are going to look like for 2020, 19, 18, 17. Keep in mind that all of the forecasts are being done at the account level and aggregated up. So that gives us the flexibility to look at things by any vintage we want, any segment we want. So I forgot to deselect aggregate. If I do this again, we'll see the individual vintages shown. Now, another thing to notice, again, the graphs can be exported. There's also a download report, but there's an export loan level. This button gives you access to all the individual account level forecasts. Everything you see here is being predicted monthly by account, and you can have access to all of that. If you want to know which accounts have the greatest attrition risk in the next 6 months, you can capture that data, aggregate, and go. If you want to know which accounts have the greatest charge-off risk in the next 24 months, again, you can grab that and use it for account decisioning. So here for vintages, you can see the peaks that are occurring out here because of that recession scenario, but you also get differences where the most recent vintage is rising up and its peak is going to coincide with that economic scenario peak, unfortunately. But you get this combination of effects, the life cycle of the vintage, the credit quality of the accounts in the vintage, and the economic scenarios. Now, if I jump over to CECIL, what you'll see is these same models being used to compute a lifetime loss forecast. We use a real economic scenario for the first 24 months. That's configurable. After that time, we revert to a long run average using a mean reverting algorithm. And so the CECIL calculation gives you some economic scenario aspect, but also some long run averages. So here I could pick any of these economic scenarios and rerun my CECIL forecast. Let's see what that looks like. If I start with my total CECIL lifetime loss, 1.8 million, come down and pick a different scenario, in this case, the COVID-19 severe, you'll see that it goes from 1.8 up to 2.4. That's a pretty typical increase when we look at clients today. Now, the CECIL calculations can be discounted. They can include Q factors. We've got a Q factors tab where you can come in and enter Q factors by product segment. These product segments are going to be the same ones that you're using on the CECIL current estimate tab. For comparisons, this is where we compare the current forecast to what has been run in the past. So you can see what was my previous CECIL estimate, what adjustments have happened to get to my new CECIL estimate. Instead of using a base scenario, if we switch instead to that COVID-19 severe scenario, you'll see a change in this component based on how much impact that recession scenario is going to have. And there it is. So it's up $320,000 in losses by switching scenarios. So There is also a CECIL report you can download, which is meant to be a complete package, everything you need in order to show your CECIL numbers. Also in here is a validation tab. This is for model monitoring. And in times like this, it's very important to monitor your models. Here you can come in, start a forecast from any point, look at the comparisons, both visually and in percentage basis. And I think actually in this case, it's important to look at this visually because you will find the model doesn't always agree, and the reasons it might not agree often have something to do with uh, policies for the institution, um, in how accounts are being managed, forbearance, things like that. So if you were to look, if you ran this today on the most recent data, you'll probably find that our model doesn't agree with your losses because you probably do have forbearance programs. So this gives you a quick view of what would have happened without the forbearance and without government assistance. And then you can use that as you look forward as an indicator of what could happen in the future. Now, these are not the only modules we have. We also can use the same capability to predict revenue and expense items to get to net profitability so that you can look at loan performance, loan valuations, loan participation valuations. We have, as part of that, we have a set of investment graphs looking at cumulative performance through the life of a participation. We have modules for economic capital. And in fact, we also have a product for doing peer comparisons, and we are able to take the forecasts from this tool and actually combine it with the P&L forecasting that we're getting from call report data, if you'd like to have both of those together. So thank you for your time. If you have any questions, please follow up with Charles Hoy, our Director of Business Development, or myself, Joe Breeden, CEO of Deep Future Analytics. Thank you.